Among all the changes that the coronavirus pandemic has brought and is about to bring, one is permanent. When the outbreak is over and the dust settles, when the lives lost, the billions lost and all the quantifiable variables are calculated, one will follow our generations for years to come: our psychology. Numerous articles have been published trying to measure the impact of quarantine on human psychology. And although they study different samples of quarantined people for different time intervals and for different infectious diseases, they all come down to one thing: extended periods of quarantine are devastating. So let's see what drives this change in our behavior, our morale, and our mentality. Perhaps the most common stressor during quarantine is the fear of infection, which includes the fear about people's own health and of course the fear of infecting others. Frustration is another. The loss of our usual routine combined with a reduction of physical and social contact create a sense of isolation and boredom. The duration plays an important role as well. Longer periods of lockdown tend to have a multiplier effect on our negative emotions, create avoidance behaviors, anger, and stress. Financial loss is also a problem, with people unable to work and having to interrupt their professional activities with no advanced planning. The effects appear to be long-lasting, especially for professions that require physical attendance. As expected, financial loss goes hand in hand with supplies. Having inadequate supplies such as food, water, and medicine while isolated is another major stress factor associated with anxiety and anger that remains visible even months after the quarantine period. Last but not least, information asymmetry. Poor information from public health authorities about an ongoing threat, insufficient guidelines about actions to take, and confusion about the purpose of quarantine all create a sense of injustice and lack of liberty, leading to anger and perhaps depression. Each one of these factors are proven to have detrimental consequences on the mental health of the general population worldwide. The research hypothesis in the majority of published papers is simple. Is the pandemic and the related containment measures associated with higher levels of depressive and anxiety symptoms? In particular, frustration, loneliness, and uncertainty about the future are common reactions and represent well-known risk factors for several mental disorders, including anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorders. An interesting study was conducted using a sample of 1,278 quarantined individuals and a control group of the same size. The authors used the participants' Twitter posts to measure the depression level changes over time with the use of a lexicon. Results showed that the anxious depression level change of the unquarantined group is substantially smaller than that of the quarantined group across all 4 weeks under investigation. The experiences that each individual might have during lockdown differ substantially. Personal or professional issues we might already be facing seem bigger and totally unavoidable during quarantine, while at the same time, the strength to fight them seems to diminish. So what can we do about it? Can the government prevent or plan to minimize the effect of those stressors on people's mental health? Theoretically, yes. First of all, the quarantine period has to be kept as short as possible, since by already being a major stressor for people, it is associated with poorer psychological outcomes. It's not just the duration though, it's the extensions as well. For people already in quarantine, an extension, no matter how small, is likely to exacerbate any sense of frustration or depression. At the same time, it is crucial to give people as much information as possible. Quarantined people tend to fear the possibility of being infected or infecting others. They also often have catastrophic appraisals of any physical symptoms experienced during the quarantine period. That's why public health officials have to be clear about their risks and should prioritize that those under quarantine have a good understanding of the disease in question and the reasons for quarantine. Now overall, an increase of psychiatric symptoms and of mental health problems in the general population is expected, and mental health services worldwide are not prepared to manage the short and long-term consequences of the pandemic. That's why it is necessary for governments to have a clear picture of the impact that these stressors are having on mental health and well-being, so they can develop the appropriate preventive interventions for the general population as well as for the different at-risk groups. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support our content and share your thoughts in the comments.